The combined data of mankind. I've had some people being very doubtful in my statements, telling them that it's taken the combined data of mankind to truly see what has been the cause of aging and all sickness. We have the history of the Greeks, we have the history of the Romans, we have the history of the amazing Hebrew, and their what is called religious history, but the Bible truly being of the beginning of the trials and tribulations of them bringing forth truth to this day and time of their existence and of what they heard from their God. Then we have other religions, many of them built off of the great Hebrew religion and beliefs of the day, the Ten Commandments, these mighty things of the Hebrew religion of the days gone by and this very day we live in. But let's talk about this. Let's try to get it locked into our mind here. The men in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, and naturally the 19th, the 20th, and now this 21st century we live in, have, whether they desire to admit to it or not, you can watch any movie, you can read any book, and there will be the quotes come to mind to these people writing these books, and they will write it whether they are writing against religion, whether they are writing on atheism, anything. They must use words that were brought forth due to the combined data of religious history. They will say and they will speak, even the very term, let's say, Jesus Christ. Why did they say that? You'll see atheists do this. Well, Jesus Christ. Why would somebody say something like that? Did you see that? Oh, Jesus Christ, give me a break. They would say things like that. The history of the Hebrew Bible has set the mind for many things in history. But, again, we must go to the Romans and the Greeks before the Hebrew had truly affected them greatly. They had their own religions taking place, but still these men were born of Adam. They were born of Seth, Japheth. They were born of these men, and they helped make and bring forth all civilized civilizations. But the Greeks came from miles around to become Greeks, as in America. In America, we've had the British, the Irish, the Danish, the Germans. They came from many, many miles away to be Americans. That was the same case with the Greeks. We hear of the Greeks, all of their great acts and their great philosophy, but the majority of the philosophers truly were men who migrated to Greece. They heard of the philosophers and they were drawn there by the very power of wanting to understand existence. And the Greeks at the time had a greater understanding of existence than most other cultures. But again, as the Greek society moved into more what they were calling modern times of the Greeks, they began to be more and more influenced by the Hebrew people and their teachings in their Bible. What does this have to do with science? What could it possibly affect in science? I, a word researcher, I am a man who years ago decided that I was going to find the truth, and as I received hypothesis from the great spirit of hypothesis that all the greats through history have received, and I received a hypothesis, and that's why I'm going to follow this. And I said, I'm not a great man. I'm not a mighty scholar, truly. But I'm going to begin to search for my truth here and see if I can prove my hypothesis. You'll have to excuse me, I fractured my jaw as a small boy and dislocated it, so you will see me struggle with my speech at times. But all the great men in history who brought forth data to this day, they had to have their hypothesis. And they had them, and they documented them. So I had my hypothesis. I said, we have so much data. We have so much data on everything. I believe we have the very cure for aging and sickness in the data of mankind. I received a hypothesis. I said, I believe it's laying right at our feet, the very end of aging and sickness. I believe that the very end of all mental diseases, all physical diseases, all diseases of depression, all these things. I said, we've got to have this. It's too much data. We have an information highway that seems endless nearly. So I began to search, and to my shock, to my surprise, I began to see men of the past that literally prophesy this day when men such as myself and other men you will see in the news who are demanding to understand the truth of all this data. The great Isaac Newton, an amazing man who he dreamed hypothesis, he dreamed theory, he dreamed law that was going to be law. He thought of it each day, and he would tell you this, I just sat and thought. How do you do these things? He said, I stood upon the shoulders of giants, and I just thought. I just sat and meditated on things. After reading, of course. But he made this powerful statement in one of his many quotes of Isaac Newton that they're so beautiful, so prophetic. And he was a great believer in the Hebrew history. It's the Bible, it's the book, and that's what history books are this day. They're called history books. The history of the Hebrew people. Isaac Newton believed in this. So do I. So do many other men. But here was the amazing thing that I began to see. Isaac Newton's prophecy was coming to be. Isaac Newton said, there comes a day when a body of men will gather together. He says in the end times, but Isaac Newton, he spoke later on that he felt the end times would be in the 2060 and such as this, because that was the subject on everyone's mind. Everyone, as this day, they say this is the end. But my hypothesis has always been this, and I have found proof of this in the history of men. My hypothesis has been that this is the beginning, not the end, of an amazing earth. You'll see it mentioned in all of the religions, especially the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew book, the Hebrew history book. But you see in all the religions they will speak of the Shangri-La that can be found and can be reached. The paradise, the Shangri-La, the heaven on earth. The heaven coming to earth. These things mentioned by different religions, different societies, and as I say, I believe the majority of them that have such statements were affected by the Hebrew history of the Hebrew people. And they're following what they knew to be their God. The very genome of the Hebrew cries out the word God, cries out the voice of God, as does the genome of mankind cry out the word of God. The creation God developed called the word, called utterance. Well, again, let's go to Isaac Newton. It's something you must combine together here, but there's so much to combine to get the picture proper in your mind that the combined data of mankind has now ended aging and sickness. But the Greek and the Hebrew were joined together by what historical volume, what historical book joined together the Greek and the Hebrew? the Hebrew Bible. The great philosophers, the great prophets of the Hebrew Bible. The Greeks called their prophets philosophers. The Hebrews called their philosophers prophets. So, the Greeks had their hypothesis, and the Hebrew had their prophecies. This day we find, after the Hebrew history book joined them together and said there is no difference between the Hebrew and the Greek. What do we find? The hypothesis of the Greek philosophers are this day being proven by science massively. The Greeks literally helping bring forth science since the 1600s, the 1500s, when the literature of the Greeks began to come into light again, where they were having small findings of the books of Plato and different people. But the hypothesis of the Greeks, their prophecy, their hypothesis, have come into light this day to where they were very correct. They were atoms. They prophesied that they were small bits of matter called atoms, and that they made up the very universe. Their prophecy is not proven. They told us the end from the beginning. The Greeks told us what we would find in science this day. The end of science, they told us from the beginning of their science and their philosophy and their prophecy. So their data has helped me, a very small word researcher who is merely looking back through the annals of history, the annals of the data of mankind. I can look at it in writing. It was sent to us in writing by men, hundreds, even thousands of years ago. And now I can look upon it with my hypothesis and have my hypothesis proven. The data, I said this, I believe in the data of mankind, there is the end of aging and sickness already sitting on a plate waiting for us to pick it up, and how they would say, let's say in the Greek and in the Hebrew, pick it up and eat it. Consume this word, consume this data, bring it together and make it work for us, make it be a functioning machine. That is the amazing thing. Without utterance, we would not have machines. We would not have any creation of any kind of science. So what did we just talk about? The Greeks, philosophers, which were truly, and if the Hebrew of that day looked upon them, oh, that is the philosophers in Greece. The Greeks called themselves philosophers. If the Hebrew was describing them in that day, they would say, where did you learn this? From the Greek prophets. The Greek prophets, they were hearing hypothesis. They were hearing from God. Hearing from the very genome of their body. Now, mankind has proven this day that there is word in the genome of man. I just told you that science has proven this day that the very word is embedded in the genome of mankind. They have analyzed it and they have brought it down to 4 and 5 different chemicals that make up life. Just rearranged. Just arranged this way, that way, always in a condon, always in a triplet, always being used to bring forth the design of a protein, of a peptide that will keep this body functioning. But mankind breaks it down, and it's literally a functioning system that when the word is placed upon it, it brings forth a word. The word exists. Data, word, exists in the very genome of mankind. Just recently, and it's been said to now be a hoax, which I stated, I hypothesized, I philosophed, I philosophized, I prophesied that in the genome of man would be a message left by the very creator of life in the code and the word of the genome of each cell of the body, that there would be a message left from the very maker of our existence. Harvard came out that they had found a message from the Creator and said that you have found the meaning of life. Now share it with all mankind. Well, we have found the meaning of life. We have found how it is developed. Not so much the meaning, but we have the meaning sent to us, but it's hard for many to accept. But I hypothesized years ago, and I wrote it and sent it to men, that I believed in the genome of man there was a message from that created us long ago. Some men call it an alien life form created us long ago. I say not. I say they call things UFOs these days, unidentified. We don't know what it is. I call everything an IFO, an identified omen. An identified omen. A flying omen, you see. A UFO, IFO is mine. Identified flying omen. We have the data to explain all things on earth already documented. Our problem is finding it in the data. In the combined data of mankind, we can look and we say, if you have the right frame of mind, if you have the right hypothesis, the right theory in your mind, you can look at the data of mankind and come out of there with any question you have. This day, there was a day when you couldn't do that, but not in this day. This day of the combined data of mankind, this Alexandria library we have this day is mind-boggling. We have dug up the history of our ancestors, literally dug it up, examined it, found their written word, and we have put it in libraries around the earth. I've always wanted to go back and see the library of the Alexandrian library, the Library of Alexandria. The great library of Alexander. Just a great library. Can you imagine the data in there that we've missed this day? Much of it was garbage like we have this day. Much of it is garbage. But in the midst of that garbage, you can solve any riddle. You can solve any puzzle of the mind if you know what to look for. So let's try to stay on track here. The combined data of mankind. Who else had philosophies and prophets that prophesy? Who else had these that came true this day through the workings of science, that science has now proven the mystery of their hypothesis, of their theories, of their laws, of their word from their God, they said, the word from the creator of their genome. Who has been proven by science even more greatly than the Greeks? The history of the Hebrew people. The history of the Hebrew philosophers. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Job, Noah. The men speaking in the book of Job. They've been proven this day by God's science. You have to call it God's science if God's word. Tell me, do you believe they received this word through their very genome? That the Hebrew people and the Greek people were more strongly connected to that made them eons ago? That made them thousands of years ago? Are they more in tune to that genome of our body, and they just receive that message that I have philosophized and prophesy and have a hypothesis that in the very genome of the body is a message from our Creator? Do they hear it more greatly? Is that why they were able to hypothesize? Hypothesize. Let's keep that one. I like it. Hypothesize the prophecy, the prophesying of the future events and the future findings of God's Word creation science. Was it through the genome, or did God come to the Jewish people? To the Hebrew people, did God come to them? Let's talk further on the combined data of mankind and how it has been proven this day by God's science. In the book of the history of the Hebrew people, in the, it is in the book of Isaiah, the 46th chapter, the 10th verse, where Isaiah states that God, was it through his genome, or did God speak to Isaiah directly? That is the question for you to answer. I know the answer. It's for you. But Isaiah stated for God, through his powerful genome of the universe, he stated that God would tell us the end from the beginning. That God would tell us the end of history from the beginning. And more so, the history of science from the beginning. It is an amazing thing that God's writings, the children of God, they tell us, the Hebrew people, who the Bible says, the Torah says, are the children of Adam. So the Hebrew people had tribes that were lost. So it could be any of us. We could be Hebrew. The Hebrew people, their God stated, I will give you the end from the beginning. Then later on in his writings in the New Testament, he tells us there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, saying that the Greeks are basically one of the lost tribes of Israel. So, he told us, I declare the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasures, said Isaiah, that God had spoke to him through his genome. Or did God come to it? But still, Isaiah had that word written. He put it down in data. So let's think about some of the things science has discovered today. Science has discovered that mankind, when they examined the genome of all creatures on earth, they find that mankind is more closely associated to what? What is mankind's genome almost identical to? The worm. The worm. Okay, now if we search the history of the Hebrew people, we find that Isaiah told us that God declared the end from the beginning, what we would find at the end. He prophesied it, he philosophized it, he hypothesized it from the beginning. In the book of Job, in the book of Mark, even David, in the Psalms, spoke of how mankind is a worm. Is there a bad thing about being a worm? We've been mankind up to this point. We're just the mankind worm. We're a great worm. Do you not think so? Every time my wife walks by, I look and I say, there goes a worm right there. So, the Bible told us in the beginning that we are worms. And science this day has proven that there's no other being like mankind except for the worm. The Greeks, They prophesied that all things were made of atoms. This day we have proven all things are made of atoms. Isaac Newton hypothesized. He prophesied that there would be men in this day that would, a body of men who would demand the true meaning of the Bible and bring it forth, and they would do so in the midst of much discussion and much hatred and much contempt for the Bible. Isaac Newton prophesied this. I am a man who is telling you that I have went into the combined history, the combined data of mankind, and I have found proof that we can now end aging, and I have even found the cure for the end of aging. And I found it in the combined data of mankind. From this day to days gone by, I have found it. Okay, so let's discuss maybe one more item here. The Lord told us, the Lord God of the Hebrew people, was it through their genome that he spoke this to their priests, or did God come unto them? That is a question to be answered by you. I know the answer. Again, God said to eat the meat, but to burn the fat. Eat the meat, but burn the fat. What has science proven this day? And in that culture of that day to this very day, the majority of cultures on this earth devour fat and just think you're supposed to eat the fat and eat it as much as you can. Now this day science has proven what is bad for us. What is the thing that causes clogged arteries? What is the thing that causes serious problems in man's health this day? Fat. God told us, fat, burn it, don't eat it. Get rid of it. Burn it, don't eat it. I say it goes even deeper than that. I say it's because there are certain viruses embedded in the fat that if you eat the fat, not only does it come in and clog your arteries, but it also brings in certain viruses and phages that have been able to devise a way to store in the fat, because you see the body, it's rejecting that fat. The body of animals, the body of any creature is rejecting that matter, trying to get it out of their blood, get it out of the system, so they store it in fat. They also store extra energy, glycogen, glucose, all these things stored in the fat of animals, but also as much trash as they can get rid of, and things that they're doing. They say, man, we got too much of this. Let's put it in the fat. So God told them long ago, no, don't eat the fat. You'll get everything you need out of the meat, but burn the fat. Okay, I must at least mention one more here. In the book of Leviticus, the history of the Hebrew, the combined data of mankind, because we go to the Greeks, the Romans, the Hebrew, but the Greek and the Hebrew are just so amazing, because so much of what they wrote of their history and of what they felt they had received from their God, their very genome, what they had received was word on what is righteous. So they had a problem of leprosy in the day of the books of the Torah being written. So the priests, Moses and the priests, said that they had God tell them, was it through their genome, or did God come to them? You be the judge. Any way, here is the situation of a powerful, powerful statement. God taught them, the priest taught the people, when you have a house that has mold and mildew in it, you go in there and it will be causing sickness. And it will be causing acts of mental disturbance. Okay? God told them to clean this house best you can, and if you still cannot get it clean, to destroy this house, take it completely apart and take the wood away from the living area of the people. Now what have we found just recently in the last few years, last 10, 15 years, science has found that mold and mildew causes cancer. What did they tell us? If you can't get rid of this stuff, probably you've got to destroy this house. You've got to gut it. Just now coming to this realization. But we were told that in the beginning of the history of the Hebrew people. God said, if you have mold and mildew too bad in your house, get rid of it, man, because it's going to be destroying you. It's going to be causing cancers. It's going to be doing all these things. Here's the amazing thing to me. God said it is a leprosy of the house. This house has a leprosy. What has mankind found in science this day? That the cause of mold and mildew is a species of the same fungus and mycobacteria that cause leprosy. He told us the end from the beginning. Amazing. So this again is to answer the question of how did I look at the combined data of mankind and find the cure for aging and sickness and premature death. Do you see how our ancestors sent us so much? Then we get in the 1800s and the early 1900s, and we had men who had still followed the words of this history of our people, of the Greeks and of the Hebrew, and they began to have their hypothesis. And amazingly, I found these men in history, and I said, oh my God, they have the same hypothesis as I did, Rodney Berry, but they did not have the lifespan to bring it forth. I have made up my mind, and I pray you will make up your mind with me, that we are now going to end aging, sickness, and premature death by using the combined history of mankind. The Muslims spoke of things attacking them through the air, but they learned this from the Hebrew. They learned this from the Hebrew people. The Chinese, the Greeks, speaking of their demons that enter us. Now science has proven that there is bacteria, spirits in from the air, unclean spirits. The Hebrew called it unclean spirits, evil spirits. The Greek called it evil spirits. They called them demons. The Muslim went on after they learned from the Hebrew, and they started calling them jinns. Jinns entering them, saying that they caused them to act crazy. These jinns are causing you to act crazy. The Hebrew saying they're causing you to act silly, crazy, to do strange acts that are not of human nature. Now science is just now proving that the jinns, the bacteria and the phages of the body, the unclean spirits that you can't see with the naked eye, that they said plainly and boldly back then, we can't see this warfare going on around us here. There's a bunch of things in the air we cannot see, but I'm telling you they exist, and they're entering us, and they're causing us to do things that we're not supposed to do. Now what is science just now coming to the conclusion? That the bacteria of the gut are making neurotoxins, the very neurochemicals, the very chemicals the body makes to talk to itself. Mankind makes neurochemicals just to say, I got to get up and eat this morning. I've got to walk. I've got to talk. The neurotransmitters of the brain of mankind deciding what to do. The gut bacteria, the unclean spirits, the demons, the jinns, the evil spirits that they couldn't see because they didn't have microscopes are causing people to act strangely, science now says. Causing bipolarism, science now says. Using bacteria to battle other bacteria, saying if they take probiotics, they will no longer be a bipolar person. It will help them calm down. Giving women probiotics to make them not be manic depressive, making them not have suicidal thoughts. Proving conclusively the ancestors of our people. We this day, especially science, is supposed to be saying, we apologize. Even me in my younger days, I said it's sad they didn't have these things. It's sad they didn't understand things better back then. We'd be living in a greater society. We'd be living in a much better society. When now I have to, in my shame, say, my God, they built this day's society. They prophesied it to us. They sent us the word that helped us build this society. Without their research, without their hypothesis, without their prophesying, we would have nothing this day. We'd be sitting in a tree picking the bacteria off our butts with no utterance, no brain to think with, just looking around and thinking, what in the hell is going on here? So, there is your answer. How have I looked into the history of man and found the end of aging and premature death? They told us long ago how to do it. They even told us in the 1800s and the 1900s. They told us in the 1800s the ingredients we are to use, the molecules that we are to use to destroy aging. And I, with my hypothesis, found it. So please, enjoy the websites that I have developed, that I give respect to the history of religion, that I give the respect to the history of science, that I give respect to the history of mankind. Enjoy them. Learn from them. Because I'm telling you this, I gather them in. As Isaac Newton, the great prophet, the great hypothesis that sprung from his mind and said, there comes a day when a body of men are going to demand the truth of the history of the Hebrew people. And they're going to do so in the midst of much clamor and much confusion, because men will not believe that their ancestors sit in the very basis of science this day. Without their base, science would never exist this day. Never. We would never have brought forth science without the priests such as Brown, who invented optics because he believed in his God. And he said, you know what? I need to see better, and God tells me there's things in the air here. I want to find them. Brown, a priest who had a hypothesis that we could see better with optics. A hypothesis, a prophecy. And now this day we see the very farthest distant galaxies. I'm telling you this. I have found the cure for aging and premature death. And I gather men, women, children to prepare for the end of aging and death, and prepare for Shangri-La here on earth. Prepare for paradise, if my jaw will allow me to say it to you. I have much respect for you, so please accept this as my answer to your question. How did I find and how do I believe that the combined data of mankind has now all answers? Did I not just explain it to you? The Hebrew history, the Greek history, the Roman history. I can find things in Roman religion that now points to what causes our disease this day of aging, sickness, and proved also the Hebrews and the Greeks. But no other men have ever seen this. So, my hypothesis is true. Your hypothesis is soon to be true. I pray this answer will make you now hypothesize and prophesy and philosophize anything you can into existence. My name is Rodney Berry. Have a good day.